acceptance that I am a sinner in need of a Savior, and Jesus Christ is that Savior. That we might all move that way. Are we committed to that? Are we working to maintain the unity toward that goal that everyone would understand the gospel? And that everyone would have knowledge, a transforming understanding of our Savior, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. Man, are we all moving to become more like Christ? That's what he says in the next phrase, to mature manhood. Okay, this is the picture to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That's our evidence. That's our measuring stick. We go, are we looking more like Christ? In our affections, in our attitudes, in our actions, are we looking more and more and more like Christ? Because if we're all moving toward the unity, a saving understanding of the gospel, and a transforming understanding of the Savior, man, we're going to look more like Jesus. Paul uses contrast very effectively in a number of places. Contrast has an interesting effect, and really it can help us to see things more clearly, can't it? And so it's not surprising to me that Paul just pauses for a moment to say, hey, let me give you contrasting pictures here, okay? If you're not moving toward mature manhood, if you're not moving toward the fullness of Christ, let's look at the contrast of that. So that we may no longer be children, it's the first contrast, tossed to and fro by the waves, second contrast, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness in deceitful schemes. Let's just look at the contrast between childhood and adulthood. Are there any differences there? Okay, yeah, we could call the kids back in here and we could look father and son and we could see some physical differences and we could notice that adults are different than kids, right? We function differently, we live differently, we move differently. So Paul says, here's the contrast. We're not children anymore, we're adults now. And so mature manhood, the fullness of Christ, looks more like being an adult than being a child. We're not tossed to and fro by the waves. I don't know if you've ever seen waves crashing on the shore, or maybe a boat that's sitting in the waves being tossed around. I have a picture. If you want to skip a slide, Matthew, you'll find a picture of a boat tossed and then one sitting anchored in calm water. It's a contrast, isn't it? You imagine standing on the beach right there, seeing that boat get tossed and going, maybe we ought to step back just a little bit. Being tossed is very unsettling. But being anchored, being in the harbor of Christ, it looks very, very different. And finally, he says, don't be blown around by the wind, carried about. It's fall. I love fall. The only downside of fall is that the leaves fall off my trees. And this